Call us Sophia or call us Sophia. We'll pick you up, take you home, and straighten out your life.
50 years ago, television came to Rochester. Maybe you remember the days of Wham TV and shows like Cinderella Weekend or Open House. In part one of their series, Out of the Box, Scott Feibush and photojournalist Kevin Strong take a look back at the early days of local TV.
Good evening, friends. As spinning goes the weekly Wheel of Fortune.
In the beginning, there was radio.
You want to get married too?
For 25 years, it brought Rochester the news, music, comedy, and drama. But with the end of World War II, a new medium was on the horizon.
The shadow knows.
After that point, all I did is hear things with radio. Hey, this is big time now. I can look and see it.
In 1948, Rochester's oldest radio station, WHAM, applied for the city's first television license. Construction began on a multi-million-dollar studio on Humboldt Street.
Your being on every week has helped sell millions of sets.
Thank you very much.
But while Buffalo and Syracuse were watching Milton Berle and Ed Sullivan that year, television in Rochester would have to wait a bit. Today, we don't think much about the TV towers that dot the top of Pinnacle Hill, but 50 years ago, this was all open space. And the proposal to build Rochester's first TV tower up here started a zoning battle that delayed the start of television for months. WHAM and its owner, Stromberg Carlson, finally won, and the tower began to rise. Finally, the big day arrived. Saturday, June 11th, 1949, the start of regular programming on WHAM TV, Channel 6. Ross Weller was one of the first announcers.
It took off in a big hurry.
From 1,000 TV sets in Rochester that first day, there were 50,000 a year later, watching shows like Weller's Open House.
All done live, you know. I just stood up in front of the camera. The program director said, here's a half hour, stand up and do something.
These two are the same thing.
El Pelletier was selling TV sets back then. His own set was one of the first in the neighborhood.
I had company every night, 7 days a week. And it became a problem after a while because people were always calling because nobody else had one at present time.
It wasn't just living rooms drawing the crowds. Weller's show Cinderella Weekend featured an in-studio audience.
We had in Radio City, the auditorium held 376 people. And every Tuesday night, 9 to 9:30, when we were on, we'd have the place packed.
Your brother Frank hired me. Get out of here now!
For those first few years, WHAM TV had the dial to itself, thanks to a freeze on new licenses caused by the Korean War. When the freeze was lifted, 4 radio stations applied for one open channel. 2 of them, WHEC and WVET, agreed to share Channel 10, and they were awarded the license together in 1953. On November 1st, Rochester viewers had their second channel.
In local markets, each time a station went on the air, there was a pioneering spirit, a pioneering element, if you will, and you were feeling your way through.
Warren Doremus was already an established reporter on WHEC radio, but the way WHEC TV shared time with Veterans Broadcasting's WVET TV meant he had little chance to do TV news at first.
Veterans would have a strip across the board at 6 o'clock in the evening, so they were able to pioneer the news on Channel 10. We did the news, but we would do it on alternate nights at 11 o'clock.
But Rochester TV in the 1950s meant more than just news. Channel 10 offered a daily talk show with a young host named Eddie Meath. WHAM TV had moved to Channel 5, where viewers saw Trudy McNall's cooking show every morning. And on weekends,
The station took out all the seats in the auditorium and put in a wrestling ring. Every Saturday afternoon, we had Gorgeous George and this guy and all the big wrestling stars in those days.
By the end of the decade, Channel 5 was known as WROC. Many of its early local shows and their hosts were gone.
I got out the business in 1961. We sold the station, and at that point there was nothing to do for my type of work, being an MC and all of that.
Channel 10 ended its shared time arrangement that year when WHEC bought out WVET, whose owners then bought WROC, which promptly moved from Channel 5 to Channel 8. And if Rochester viewers found that confusing, they were just getting started. In Part 2, we'll look at the tumultuous 60s in Rochester, both on and off the air. Scott Feibush, our News.
for you in surety bonding, voluntary benefit and employer-paid programs, as well as retirement and investing strategies. Find your way to the Landmark Group.
From the civil rights riots to the moon landing, Rochester's TV stations brought viewers into the heart of the 1960s. In part 2 of their series, Out of the Box, Scott Feibush and photojournalist Kevin Strong continue their look at 50 years of TV in Rochester.
Rochester was changing fast at the start of the 1960s. Midtown Plaza was being built. Across the river, the Civic Center was hailed as the most important set of new buildings in a generation. New roads were being built, and to link them, a state-of-the-art interchange called the Can of Worms. But on the TV dial, channel surfers still had just 2 choices.
There were 9 different companies originally sought the license for Channel 13. One of them dropped out. Then there became 8.
In 1957, the FCC had allocated a 3rd channel, Channel 13, to Rochester. One group of citizens wanted it for educational television. Other groups wanted a commercial license.
And the FCC said, go ahead, you 8 people get together, form an interim company, get that station on the air, start serving the public. That's what was done.
You'd never recognize it now, but this was where Channel 13 was born, in a building here on Clinton Avenue that used to be home to WVET. They had to rush to get everything ready, but they made it on the air in September of 1962.
And tired men know that they've managed to achieve an almost impossible goal. Rochester now has 3 television stations.
I remember it well.
Will now have full service
Jerry
from all
Carr,
the
the weather outside, first voice on the air at Channel 13. Jerry, I forgot exactly what he said, but boy, we were off and running.
And just in time, in the next few years, TV news would come of age, with national stories like the Kennedy assassination.
A comment of stunned disbelief at first that such a thing could happen in 1963. At the same time, a feeling of deep personal loss on the part of many people. This is Dick Burt reporting to you from Clinton Avenue in downtown Rochester.
And locally with a story that broke late on a warm Friday night in the summer of 1964.
I got a call in the middle of the night from someone, I guess it was one of our photographers. He said, well, he said, something's going on downtown. I can't believe it, but he says it sounds like all hell is breaking loose downtown.
Rochester had become the flashpoint for one of the country's first race riots.
So we got out, set up the camera, and here were these cars coming through with windshields smashed, front and rear. And that's where I did my first interview. The first guy that came through with a windshield that was out was shaking something almost uncontrollably. He got out of the car, he said, my God, I don't know what's going on here.
The next morning, viewers awoke to pictures like these of inner city neighborhoods on fire and National Guard troops trying to take control.
It was pretty rugged journalism, but this was a rugged time.
A time Rochester TV chronicled through the blizzard of 1966, the killings of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King, and the televised images of man walking on the moon.
I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
It might not have been a giant leap for mankind, but September 1966 marked a new era for Rochester TV. After years of fighting for a piece of Channel 13, the educational broadcasting group called RAITA thought it had won the channel, only to see the FCC overturn its own decision. Finally, RAITA decided to start its own station, Channel 21, up on the UHF dial, which many sets couldn't even receive. WXXI started out in the girls' gym in the basement of the Old East High School on Alexander Street.
Hello, Mr. Echo.
Programming ran a few hours a night, 5 nights a week, in glorious black and white. In the meantime, the city's other stations were getting their first color TV cameras.
Channel 13 we were so anxious to get it on the air, we set the camera on a table, not a tripod, a table. And I hunkered down so that I would be at eye level with the camera. And we went on with our 11 o'clock newscast in color for the first time. And it was a thrilling moment.
Technology would bring many more thrilling moments. In Part 3, we'll look at the way Rochester's TV stations,
this is Barbara Rogers for
and the people who worked there, changed in the decades that followed. Scott Feibush, Our News.
Our News is sponsored in part by Southwest Barbecue.
From 3 channels to 80, from black and white to high definition color, TV has come a long way since the 1960s. In part 3 of their series, Out of the Box, Scott Feibush and photojournalist Kevin Strong complete their look back at the 50th anniversary of TV in Rochester.
Romper, bumper, stomper, boo.
If you were a kid in Rochester in the 60s, you grew up with Miss Rita and Romper Room.
Some 500 Rochesterians of Italian.
Your parents woke up with Eddie Meath on Channel 10.
Hello, this is Ann Keefe.
Watched Ann Keefe on Channel 8 and checked out the weather outside with Jerry Carr on Channel 13. If you were lucky, the old black and white console gave way to a new color set by the start of the 70s, just in time to watch Rochester TV tell the nation about the uprisings at Attica Prison.
Hung so thick in the air, newsmen hundreds of yards away in front of the prison felt its effects.
Behind the scenes, a technological revolution was changing the way TV newsrooms operated. Until the mid-70s, TV crews shot their stories on 16mm film.
It took about 3 hours to shoot the film, bring it back, process the film, edit the film, and get it on the air.
The mid-70s brought something new, videotape.
Videotape was able to put your viewers at the scene immediately or close to immediately as possible.
Film at 11 gave way to videotape anytime.
Gabe, 3 months and 10 days after the trial began, both.
And when Channel 10 brought the live eye to town in 1977, viewers could see the news at the moment it was happening.
WHEC was the first station to have live capabilities at the time, and I remember we were being sent out in all kinds of weather, essentially trying out our new capability.
With the coming of satellites a few years later, Rochester TV crews could go live from anywhere.
The first satellite transmission that I remember was Don Alhart down in Florida and talking live from our set in Rochester to Don down in Orlando. And it was just, hey, this is terrific.
In front of the camera, reporters and anchors like Wyoma Best, Al White, and Jackie Walker were part of a pioneering generation of women and minorities in Rochester newsrooms. At Channel 10, Margaret Graham Smith was the first woman to co-anchor the 6 o'clock news in Rochester.
I was the first on-air person to become pregnant while working, and there were some discussions about whether or not I would be showing on television and how long I would be working and whether or not I'd be interested in returning to my job.
There were breakthroughs in station management as well. Channel 10 became the first minority-owned network affiliate anywhere in the country when Gannett sold it to Reagan Henry in 1978. 2 years later, Rochester's first independent station made its debut.
We're Rochester's entertainer.
The arrival of Channel 31 was just the first of many changes in the 1980s. Many of the faces may have been familiar.
Good evening.
The New York Mets got the best of
Tonight on the 11 o'clock update.
After the verdict was read.
up to about 4 inches of snow to fall.
Staffen is still on the loose.
Commentary by Simeon Smith.
Good morning and welcome to
Marshall M. McCarthy is currently
special edition, a salute to our...
But the business around them wasn't.
Broadcasts the following program in stereo.
TV went stereo. Channels 8 and 10 swapped networks. And as local stations changed hands, owners found local news was making money, which meant more newscasts at more times of the day.
You had about 3 or 4 hours a day, and it was a whole new ball game. And news became the cornerstone, really, of an over-the-air broadcast station.
But the 80s brought something else to town as well, cable TV. Instead of just 5 channels, cable brought Rochester dozens of networks with programming for every imaginable audience. And as the 90s dawned, cable brought Rochester a news source for local news.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Leanne Carlson.
And I'm Doug Lizette.
From just half an hour a night back in 1990, our news has grown into the area's first and only source for local news 24 hours every day. And even in this era of more than 70 channels, there's still much more to look forward to in the next half-century of Rochester TV. Digital television is already on the air in many large cities. In the next few years, it will arrive in Rochester, and with it, a new breed of TV pioneers and a new chapter to write in the story that began a half-century ago. Scott Feibush, our News.